have never had a student with such promise before you.
It is your teachings that make me strong, Supreme Leader.
It is far more than that. It is where you are from. What you are made of. The dark side. And the light.
If Skywalker returns, the new Jedi will rise.
And we are live. What is up, all of you Star Wars fans? Can you feel it in the air, baby? We are 8 days, maybe 7 days now, away from The Last Jedi. I want to say thank you to everyone who has been supporting The Last Jedi live streams. It's been super cool doing these shows with you guys, breaking down all these different aspects of The Last Jedi, rumors, theories, speculation, all the like. I'm Josh. This is the Den of Nerds. I'm, of course, here with James from the Rebel Scum podcast. James, how are you?
I am great, and can I start things off by saying that your Snoke theory sucks?
Yeah, you can definitely say that. You can definitely say that. What's interesting about that statement, though, is what's funny is I don't think my Snoke theory sucks, actually. And
Neither do I. Sorry, neither do I. I think we're on the same page.
Yeah, I think so too. And you know, obviously, it's not just a theory that I just pulled out of thin air. There's a lot of evidence. All the hardcore fans have been sort of picking this apart. I do want to say to everyone real quick before we get into the show, all you got to do, share this live stream. You just share it, and you're entered to win this Supreme Leader Snoke pop figure. Man, I'm very excited to ship this out to someone. This thing looks dope. Gold robes and all. So all you got to do is share the stream for a chance to win that. And we're going to break several times during the show to ask you guys some trivia question. You answer that in the comment section, you get the prize. So that's going to be really, really cool as well. Now, James, as I kind of build the audience a little bit more in here, I want to ask you, so this Snoke guy, for some reason, there seems to be so much mystery and attention and anticipation and just everything about Snoke is so intriguing. Do you want to go into that a little bit? Why do you think that there is such an attraction and fascination with this character?
I think it's because he is the new big bad as far as we can tell. He's so briefly shown in The Force Awakens that we know absolutely nothing about him except for that he is a leader of the First Order, which is essentially the new Empire. And so when you see that, you're like, oh, who is this guy? And I'm curious to think if we would have been so infatuated with Snoke had we not gotten the prequels. Because were we that obsessed with the Emperor? You weren't born. I was too young to really understand or appreciate that. So then we get the prequels, and we're like, oh, so Palpatine grew in power and blah, blah, blah. So now we're like, who is Snoke? Snoke has to be somebody. And I wonder if we didn't get those the stories of Palpatine, if we would even care about Supreme Leader, if we would just accept the fact that this is the new big bad. That is all you need to know. He is controlling Kylo Ren in some facet. The other thing, I think, is when Leia says it was Snoke. If you watch the movie, when she says it was Snoke who corrupted her and Han's son, that raises a lot of questions and makes you even more intrigued into who Snoke was. And that is one thing I would say J.J. Abrams and Lawrence Kasdan did very, very well with that screenplay, was teasing Snoke in that aspect, saying, okay, he's the big bad guy. You don't need to know about him. And then Leia drops that bomb, and you're like, well, who is this guy that turned their son to the dark side? After you would imagine that he would know not to go there after what happened with his grandfather. And then obviously you learn more on Bloodline and the Force Awakens novelization, and it tells you certain things. So that is why I think Snoke is so fascinating, because he is a blank character. As Brock always says, he's like, whenever we talk about Snoke, Brock's like, I don't know, maybe. We don't know anything about him. So yeah. He could be anything. He could be an Ewok. He could be a Will. He could be anything in between.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic. Personally, for me, I think the fact that he's a big bad is, obviously a big part of the attraction. Now, specifically with Star Wars, what I think is so interesting here is, even though we didn't know anything about the Emperor, his relationship to Vader sort of fills in a lot of holes for us in the original trilogy. Vader being the big bad is a big deal. Darth Vader is actually probably one of the most recognizable villains in pop culture history, and just such an iconic villain. And when you're recycling something like Star Wars, when you're coming out, if you're Disney, the villain of this trilogy is like, it is, you bet the farm on your villain, so to speak. It is such an important part of the fabric that makes this up. I mean, Star Wars is essentially good versus evil. It's a very simple archetype. It's, plays off of mythology, plays off ancient stories and philosophies. But at the end of the day, you need a very compelling and very evil bad guy. And so I think that Snoke, A, we just assume that he is that thing. But B, from everything we know about him, and we're learning more and more literally by the hour as we get closer to The Last Jedi, but he seems to fit the bill for that. So I want to ask you this. This isn't in the show notes at all, which, by the way, was a text message I sent because I didn't write show notes today. But my question is, do you think, how much thought did the story group and Disney and JJ and everyone give to this character when they were sitting down to write this script? Because remember, there were conflicting reports. We thought maybe, they just set him up. They had no idea who he actually was, what his backstory was. Then we heard reports that like, no. They had it completely figured out. So Chris Terrio and JJ are working on episode 9 right now. My question to you, sir, how much time was spent on Snoke? Do you think that Lucasfilm has this character completely figured out?
I'm going to say yes. And I think that might surprise some people because I feel like J.J. Abrams and Kasdan and whoever else, if they include anybody else in there, kind of came up with Snoke, and they're like, Snoke is the big bad. But to come up with who the big bad is, they had an outline for him. Whether or not Rian Johnson chose that outline is another story, because I think Rian Johnson said recently in an interview, I think his idea for who Rey's parents were the exact same as J.J. Abrams, but he wasn't handcuffed to what J.J. wrote. He could have done whatever he wanted. So I feel like that's the same thing with Snoke, but I think they had a lot more of it figured out than we typically give them credit for, because it feels like they're making it up on the fly. And I think aspects of Snoke have probably come in and out, but I mean, the thing is, if Snoke was just mentioned like the Emperor in A New Hope, then I would be like, they never put any thought of it. But they show his face. They decided to go motion capture. That's why I think there's something more to their planning of who Snoke is. You know what I mean? I don't think it was all completely fleshed out, but I think a large chunk of it they had an idea, which is a different thought than I had a few months ago, definitely.
Right. It's the more and more I think about it, and I guess like the more we see from just, behind the scenes, little interviews here and there and different things like of that nature, the more I think that they do have it figured out. Like, I think they know essentially who Snoke is, what Snoke is, but I think that they have left themselves a nice cushion. So first of all, we realize that the story group and everybody's like, well, we're not going to touch certain aspects of this lore. And I actually recently heard that Kylo Ren's backstory is going to be left pretty mysterious. Like, didn't Adam Driver recently say something about how there are going to be aspects of his story that are never talked about? Like, probably what they're referring to is that 6 years after he turns, or, you know what I mean, or maybe 5 years after he turns, when he's messing with the First Order for the first time. It would appear that a lot of that is going to be mysterious and sort of left open. What the story group knows and what they want to share are two different things. My gut tells me they actually know. Like, I think if you could get Pablo Hidalgo to give you a straight answer, right? If you were like in some place that no cameras were, and you could do that, I think he would be like, I know exactly who Snoke is. We pulled from this character, we pulled from this character, we pulled from this character. And also, here's how we're going to make it make sense to the casual fans. What do you think about that? I mean, you kind of gave your answer already, but...
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with that. I think that like you ask anybody over at Lucasfilm that's high enough up, and they'll be like, "This is who Snoke is. No questions about it. No questions asked." I think they pulled, but I don't know if they necessarily pulled. But I like what you said about having that cushion, where they're like, "He is the big bad." All that really matters. I feel the only thing that really, really matters about Snoke is that he is the big bad. So they have that. They have this is a point. This is a point. This is a point. Go play in that sandbox. Make sure those points get incorporated in. But he's the bad guy.
Right.
The average viewer of Last Jedi on next week, finally, God,
right,
is going to say, "Oh, he's the bad guy," and that's all they're going to care about. Now, if you do something in a movie that makes you be like, "Oh, he's more than just a bad guy," that's a completely different thing. But at this point in time, he's just a bad guy, and I think everybody aside from us is okay with that.
Right. Well, here's my only, I guess, gripe with that philosophy is that yes, he's just the bad guy, and I get that. But don't you think that in order for this trilogy to have more stakes, in order for it to be more relevant and be more bombastic and bigger in sort of every way, that Snoke has to be something more than just the bad guy the way that Palpatine was? That like. Because Star Wars, Lucasfilm and Disney really have this beautiful balance going on where they know how to make content that like 12-year-olds and grandmas can get into, right? But they also know how to appease their hardcore fans because make no mistake, they realize how important those fans are. Like when we were at Celebration, like one of the things that was really cool was you could tell, and they even would speak to this. A lot of the people would say, well, we know that these fans, the people here that spent hundreds of dollars, maybe thousands of dollars to come here and experience this, we can't just give them a poster. We can't just say this and that. We got to go into the nitty-gritty details. We got to explain all about the lore. I mean, they have stuff going on there. They had that Pablo Hidalgo and Dave Filoni panel where they just sit there and talk Star Wars, and they're breaking down how this came in from the EU. We brought this over here. We liked this piece of concept art. And they realized that nurturing that hardcore fan base is very important to their success. So, I mean, with that logic in mind, do you agree that Snoke has to be bigger and badder than the Emperor?
I hate to go full Brock here, but I'm of two minds on this one.
Okay.
And I do agree with that. But, okay, if he's bigger and better than the Emperor, then do you diminish the Emperor in the originals? And how do you make him bigger and better that's satisfying in any way? Now, and to your point of appeasing the hardcores who spend all that money to get there, who love Star Wars. And you know, Rian Johnson, I think, one of the things that makes me excited about him doing this new trilogy is he understands that, like, it's almost like when he was there, he was so excited. Like his excitement
so
for
excited. You're right.
Yeah, it was
he
infectious.
Understood. Yes.
Like I watched it 2 years ago with J.J. Abrams, and J.J. Abrams was excited. He loved it. But Rian Johnson was like, it was a completely different thing than I've seen. You know, even the actors, like Gwendolyn Christie did she hosted the Rogue One panel at Celebration.
She was pumped.
Yeah. And she but Rian Johnson was just like so like, oh my God, I love everything about it. He was taking pictures and signing autographs.
He understands the fandom. Yeah, he understands.
Yeah, and I think that's why there will be something more to Snoke. But the other thing is they also understand that we are a collection of people that aren't going to make $2 billion for them. We're going to make $700 million for them. And maybe this Snoke backstory and whatnot is better served for the novelizations, for the comics, and things like that. We might get hints of it.
Right.
I really... What you're going to talk about, I think you're going to talk about your theory in a little bit.
Yeah.
That's the one that I really want, and that is a way to make him bigger and badder than Palpatine and explain why he was not around during Palpatine's time and not interfere with or diminish the Palpatine character himself.
Right, and I think that's a pretty fair statement. Something you and I have talked a lot about off air, on air. You have to be careful because you don't want to diminish Palpatine and Vader. Vader, he looms large over this film. You know, he's a big part of it. Snoke even talks about him in the novelization. Vader's a big deal, will always be a big deal, which is something you and I think is very good. We're like, yes, thank you. But at the same time, I do think you need to go bigger. I think that Disney has sort of found a way. The Lucasfilm Story Group has found a way to make him bigger, and we're going to get into that in just a second. But I'm curious, let's kind of shift gears here. There have been a lot of ridiculous Snoke theories. A lot of fun has been had with this question, with, you know, this character. What's your favorite Snoke theory? It doesn't have to be the one you maybe believe, but what's like your favorite one so far? What do you think?
We have one of the first videos we ever did on our channel before we started putting the podcast on it was Maz Kanata is Snoke. And it was a friend of mine called me. He goes, "Hey, you have a podcast?" He goes, "Yeah, I want to be on it." I said, "Why?" He says, "I have a theory." And this guy came up with a theory on Home Alone that John Candy is the devil, and it is like the greatest theory ever.
Oh, I love
theories
like that, yeah.
Yeah, and it actually works. It plays out. It's really cool. You should check it out if you haven't. Anyway, so he gives me this theory, and I'm like, this is ridiculous. And then I'm like, tell you what, if you voice it for me, and I think it's okay, I will put pictures together, and we'll throw it up there and whatever.
Yeah.
And he did it, and it is ridiculous and not a thing whatsoever. But I actually really, really like that one. I also really like the Mace Windu one. Yeah. He's not Mace Windu. I do wish that I would love Jar Jar to come back.
Yes.
But, I don't think that will ever happen. If it does, he's not coming back as Snoke. The thing that I'm always like, whenever someone brings up a Snoke theory, it's like, well, then why would you get Andy Serkis to play Samuel L. Jackson or Lupita Nyong'o or this? Like what? It doesn't make any sense to me. So that's the one. Other than to trick us, why would you do that?
Right. My favorite theory is, and it's a meme, but it's the stormtrooper that bumped his head.
Yes.
And I love that theory because it's something that only hardcore fans get, right? And then, boom, bumps his head, and then they, like, circle in on it, and then they show Snoke. That's a great one. The Mace Windu one is amazing. I mean, dude, Vincent's the man. You know what I mean? And Vincent, if you're watching this, like, dude, yo, hit me up, dog. But honestly, his theories are great, and that was a really good one, right? I mean, I'm pretty sure that's kind of what blew up his channel, right? That
it was either that or the
Rey Palpatine.
Rey Palpatine, yeah.
I think it was sort of maybe both around the same time. Like he just boom, boom, and then they just went crazy. And good for him, dude, because he's awesome. But I would say probably the bumpy head one is probably my favorite theory. Let us know in the comment section what's your guys' favorite theory on Snoke so far, because they've been a little bit ridiculous. All right, now before we get into the timeline and into my theory, which it's correct, so we don't want to blow our wad too early. Let's do a giveaway. James, do you want to start with your question, brother?
Okay, here we go. I took this one from the Josh and Rob trivia from last week where nobody got the answer right at all.
Yikes.
How many times in the original trilogy, the original trilogy, is the word Ewok spoken?
That's a very good question. Guys, how many times in the original trilogy is the word Ewok spoken? First person to get that question correct in the comment section wins a little pork, baby. Oh my God, James is so jealous.
Oh, I am jealous.
It's been a never. Milo, you nailed it. Oh, Marissa Price, so close. Rob McDonald, what's going on, brother? 15 billion is incorrect. And I can't wait to face you in the Duel of the Fates. I have this weird premonition that something bizarre might happen in that show, but I don't want to go any further.
I can't wait for that show. Monday, 7 o'clock.
Yeah, Monday, 7 o'clock on the Rebel Scum Podcast YouTube channel. Go check that out. Rob, you're going down, man. The force is strong with me. But anyways, I'm sorry. I don't want to get too crazy over here. Yeah, Milo, you got it, man. And thank you for watching the streams. You've been very supportive of what we're doing here. I'm more than happy to send you as many Star Wars toys as you get questions correct for, my friend. So thank you very, very much.
And you can send that pork to me at care of P.O. Box.
Hey, look, James, it's been a sort of a running thing on the shows that, like, ever since I found... By the way, there's no Targets, I guess, in Canada, guys. James is Canadian. And so these little porgs, these adorable things that at first used to really bother me, are at Target, and he can't seem to get them. So it's been sort of a running thing where I sort of tease him with the porgs. But Christmas is coming around the corner, so I think James will be all right. I think he's going to get a porg. I'll say no more. So, guys, there'll be another trivia question in a bit. And like I said, share the stream for your chance to win the Snoke Pop figure. Now, let's talk about... I guess my theory, I don't know. I don't even necessarily take complete ownership of the theory itself. But it basically has to do with connections between Palpatine and Snoke. So I'm sort of going to just run through this, and then we'll talk about it, you and I, okay? So, essentially, this all has to do with a lot of the new canon novels that came out after The Force Awakens. Okay, so actually Tarkin came out before it, I believe. But all of these stories suggest that Palpatine was sensing something in the unknown regions. There was something in the unknown regions that was calling to him. At one point, he says he thinks it could be the source of his power, or perhaps the dark side itself. Okay, and interestingly, too, little side note here, Vader did not hear this calling. Only Palpatine heard this calling. Then, fast forward to the Battle of Endor, Palpatine shows up to Endor, and he knows that there's a shatter point happening. Now, a shatter point is actually an EU phrase, and I'm going to really try not to go way too deep nerdy on you guys. I'm going to try to keep it surface level so we can understand. But essentially, a shatter point is this moment in time where something drastic will change, where if you were trying to see the future, you wouldn't be able to see what the outcome was. A shatter point is something crazy. So Palpatine shows up to Endor, has a meeting with Gallius Rax, who is a character introduced in the Aftermath novels. He tells Gallius Rax that he will have to basically make the contingency plan happen if Palpatine is to disappear and not survive the battle. The contingency was basically a gathering of what was left of the Empire, having basically just the most loyal people to the Empire get in a ship, then destroy what was left of the Empire and what was left of the Rebellion, and then the contingency would leave in a ship into the unknown regions. Now, there's a lot of different versions of what exactly the contingency was trying to do. People think that maybe Palpatine was trying to go into a new galaxy to sort of start a new empire. There's a lot of, political in-talking between the members of the Empire as far as what they will do, what Ray Sloane wants to do, and all sort of stuff like that. But here's basically what happens, guys. At the end of the Aftermath series, after the Battle of Jakku, a bunch of people leave on what I believe is the Eclipse, which is a Super Star Destroyer, and it goes off into the unknown regions. Now, on that ship was General Hux and General Hux's father, okay? And we know that there was calling out in the unknown regions, and there was a place on Jakku called the Observatory, and there's another observatory on Palof in Battlefront 2, and these were ancient mapping stations that basically talked about what was going on in the unknown regions. So using the maps and using some stuff from Grand Admiral Thrawn, the Eclipse goes into the unknown regions, and then the next time we see anybody who was on that ship is when we see Hux, the younger Hux, in The Force Awakens. What that implies is that the people on the Eclipse find Snoke in the unknown regions, they create the First Order, and then they come back into our galaxy. So, I just said a lot there. James, you're familiar with this timeline. You're familiar with these concepts. What do you think about all that?
Yes. I think oh, man. The Thrawn angle on all of it, too, where Thrawn knows something's coming from somewhere else.
Yeah.
Does that tie into this? And yeah, I like the idea.
That's just the timeline. So that's not even necessarily the theory. That's just sort of what we're saying is the people of the Eclipse met Snoke. And we actually know that's confirmed because in the new Captain Phasma comic, you learn that General Hux and Captain Phasma worked together to overthrow Hux's father. And what's interesting about that is that it is a similar thing that what's going on with Kylo. Snoke wants Kylo to kill his father and overthrow him. Snoke is a manipulator. He's really twisted in that way. And so we literally know that that's the origin of the First Order and the first time that we interact with Snoke. Now what we don't know is how'd that all go down? What is Snoke? You know what I mean?
Yeah, where did Snoke come from and how did he start? And I is he that dark side thing that's calling out to Palpatine?
Right.
And I like this one thing. You said this on our Revenge of the fifth episode in May, where you said, what if Snoke is a fraud? And what if he was calling to Sheev under the guise of the dark side or something like that? And then they all go out there and he's like, but but when they go out there and they find Snoke, Snoke isn't actually that thing that was calling. He just assumes that role. He's like, yeah, that was me all along. I am the guy that was calling you. I love that idea. Yeah. I don't think that'll play out. From what it looks like, it won't. But I do like the idea that it's this dark side and Snoke is somehow connected to that.
Yeah, so, beyond the timeline, I guess, within my theory is that, okay, so if Snoke was this thing that was strong enough to sort of call the Palpatine from literally halfway across the galaxy, right? And he's strong enough to corrupt Ben Solo from afar, and we assume it's from afar, then he is that dark side power. He's very, very strong. Recent comments from Andy Serkis where he literally says that Snoke is stronger than Palpatine and than the Emperor and Vader. And when he was asked that, he said, without question. It's not like he was like, well, let's consult the power scales here. What, who is stronger? It's like, no. He was asked, is Snoke stronger than the Emperor and Vader? And he said, without question.
When he says without question, though, he says he has more resources.
Yes, I was just going to say that. What he says is he has unlimited resources. And around that statement was very interesting because Andy Serkis says, without giving too much away, he sort of linked that to he has unlimited resources. Something very interesting that you just said was about Thrawn. Okay, so let's take just a small step back here. And guys, this episode's really nerdy, but this is Snoke. This is what we do with Snoke. We go in. So in the Thrawn novel, you learn that Mithrandu, that's Thrawn's real name, is basically coming to our galaxy to either weaken us or join forces with us because of this ridiculous, crazy threat that is coming for his people. And I forget exactly how he describes it in the novel, but he says it is in pure evil and unstoppable or something like that. And so the question is that Snoke? Is Snoke that thing in the unknown regions that Thrawn fears? And here's my question to you, James. Let's just assume that Snoke is just some dude in a robe with a lot of force powers. How is some dude in a robe able to assemble all the technology and weapons that he has? How is he able to garner all this power? What do you think's going on?
I think if those two are connected, if you look at it, good old Sheev was like, we're going to rebuild our empire out there. There's something calling to me, but we're going to go out there and rebuild, and we're going to take over a whole new galaxy, and that's going to be my new empire, and blah, blah, blah. And if Palpatine's the one being tricked by Snoke, then Snoke is the one that comes, then that's how he gets all of his resources is through Palpatine. Palpatine sends them right to him, playing it. And I think that even ups the ante on Snoke a little bit, because now you're like, well, Snoke is somebody there who tricked this brilliant guy with the dark side. Now Snoke is coming. What is Snoke's endgame? And if Thrawn finds Snoke to be a giant threat, or maybe there are more Snokes out there, and if Thrawn found him to be a really dangerous guy, then this guy must be a legit danger to the galaxy as a whole. And now he's come here. But why does he want this galaxy? Why not the one? What was wrong with the one that he was in? Why is he here now?
Yeah, it begs a lot of questions. I think one of the things that's interesting for me is I think of Rebels at the end of last season, where Thrawn comes face to face with the Bendu, and he is sort of like, "What are you?" And he's not. He doesn't know what the Bendu is. But to me, what was interesting is he's not necessarily surprised at what he is seeing in the context of like, this is the Force, this is something crazy. He's more like trying to understand. Like he's still calculating. At the very end, he's still trying to figure out what this is. To me, that really sort of hints at Thrawn maybe having encountered something similar before. So if Snoke is that thing that literally the Chiss High Ascendancy is afraid of, that Thrawn, who is like the greatest strategic mind that we have in Star Wars, if he's afraid of it, then Snoke must just be like an absurdly powerful thing. Like the only thing I can think of is, and we're going to get into my theory in just a second, but the devil. Okay, so if Snoke is somewhat of the devil, then his ability to corrupt and his ability to manipulate people is where his strength comes from completely. So if he could convince some other force out there, some other military might, to come and just sequester to his needs and become his sort of new posse, then that is where all of his power lies. And I sort of like that. I sort of like this idea of this guy who's just one guy, but he's able to manipulate people and control their minds in a way that he can manifest around him anything that he wants. And so I think that's something kind of unique, maybe, to the Snoke character. Is there anything you want to touch on in that timeline again before I go into the theory about the wills and what I think's going on here?
No, I think we when I finished Aftermath, when you finish the very, very first one and you meet the chess player, you're like, oh, okay, so that's Snoke, and then you find out that's not Snoke. And I always thought Gallius Thrax was going to be like the new canon Thrawn, and now they brought Thrawn in, and when you read the Thrawn novel, it's a great novel and everything, but what does it do anything for the universe as a whole? And I think the combination of the end of the Aftermath trilogy and that little piece of Thrawn added together in the timeline together, I think that really is guiding us in the direction that we need to see. It doesn't tell us really anything about Snoke himself, but it lets you know, like, Snoke is not your Snoke theory sucks. Like, Snoke is not what you're thinking. He's that thing over there that you don't even know is a thing because you've never been exposed to it yet.
Right. Okay, so let's get into theory time, guys. So this is where my theory sort of comes from. I have a couple popular videos on YouTube right now kind of going over this. So go check those out if you want, like, explicit detail. But the whole idea here is that this ancient Force knowledge, which all circles around the wills, is clearly very important to whatever grand story Disney is coming up with. There's the famous quote from the Journal of the Wills that's at the beginning of the Force Awakens novelization, and literally as soon as I read that, which is a great novelization, by the way, there's so many great details in that book, but it pretty much lays it out there for you that the wills are somehow important to what's going on, and perhaps even like a different way of viewing the Force, right? A more ancient way of viewing the Force. Then in Rogue One, it sort of crystallizes. It really becomes pretty clear and obvious that Disney's doing something with the wills. So they're mentioned by name. There's a focus on the Kyber crystals. There's a lot of stuff going on there which they put on screen for you to understand. Now, remember back when we had gotten that Twitter argument with Pablo Hidalgo, and he pretty much admitted that the wills are in the Clone Wars? And what we're referring to is the Force priestesses, which are in the last 2 episodes of the Clone Wars. And guys, look, essentially what's going on in those episodes is Yoda goes to, like, what I would describe as Force heaven and sort of interacts with, like, Force angels. And you get this better understanding of, like, what the cosmic Force is compared to the living Force. Now, in George Lucas's original story for Star Wars, it was going to be called The Journey of Luke Starkiller as told through the Journal of the Wills. The wills were literally going to be like what the Force was. They were these godlike entities, omnipotent, omnipresent beings that were sort of cataloging what was happening in the universe. That was going to be what the crawl was and how he framed the story. Now, he abandoned that idea, but he put a lot of those themes back into Revenge of the Sith. The whole idea of Qui-Gon. Qui-Gon learned how to become a Force ghost and how to come back from the afterlife, or what we would call the cosmic Force, back into the living Force through the teachings of a shaman of the wills. And so giving sort of all of that context, I and a lot of other people in the fandom tend to believe that Snoke will be tied to either the shamans of the wills or the wills themselves. Now, one more thing I want to touch on before I go to you, James. There was a working title during pre-production of The Force Awakens that was literally called Star Wars: An Ancient Evil. And I think that's super telling because what that does is frame the idea of this whole new trilogy. Remember what we were talking about in the first part of the show. How do you not diminish Palpatine and yet establish something that's way stronger, more bombastic, and bigger? The perfect way to do that, go back to the roots. Go back way far away from where Palpatine was. Create this thing, this godlike being that was maybe hidden away or killed in some way and perhaps is now coming back and manifesting himself. And so that is where the Snoke is a will theory comes from. And I think one of the reasons it's so popular is because it sort of fills in a lot of those gaps. A lot of the problems we have with the Snoke theories are answered through this theory. So, James, you and I have talked a lot about this. I mean, what do you think about the will theory itself?
That's one that I would be on. I'm on board with until I see the movie and realize that it's not the right one. Totally fine. That one I like. I like the idea of him being like Satan, like a fallen angel type character who, you know, he was like looking at everything from above and being like, I want this for myself. And he comes crashing down. He's trying to take it. It kind of helps explain why he's in such a deformed state. Correct. He's trying to grow and whatever. It could explain why he has a fascination with Jedi, why he really wants Jedi, because that's how he could see to overtake everything. I'm sure there's a little bit more to that. It's Rian Johnson after all, and there'll be time travel and Bruce Willis and whatnot. So it'll be great. But I like the idea. I just, like you said, if an ancient evil, if you go back in time, then you have Palpatine did his thing, but there was something like Doomsday and Superman, not the movie, but like he came down. He was been in there for a while. That's the original story. I don't know if they changed it, but you know, when he came crashing down at the same time as the meteor that brought Clark Kent, he's there the whole time, and then all of a sudden now this thing can rise up, and it doesn't diminish Lex Luthor at all. He's still your villain, so that's a way they could play Snoke. For me to be satisfied, I guess. I'll be satisfied no matter what. Look, I'm going to like the movie.
Right. I mean, we'll be satisfied either way, but I think uniquely to this theory is its ability to satisfy casuals and hardcore. Because the hardcore people are going to be like, oh my God, I need to know more about the wills. I need to know more about this time period. I'm satisfied with that answer because it feels nerdy enough. For me, I can sort of make sense of how this would not tarnish Palpatine. And for the casuals, and this is what I keep saying to people, is like, look, it's as simple as saying Snoke is the devil. I mean, how simple is that? I mean, he's this Force God, or like a version of God that has fallen. And that is just so easy to explain to casual fans. By the way, that's part of the flavor of Star Wars. Star Wars has always done that. It's taken easily understood concepts from old mythology or stories, and it recycles them in an interesting way. This is the Joseph Campbell, the hero's journey, even some of the numbers that reappear in all of these stories. It's fascinating to me. So I think that that's kind of part of it in and of itself, is its ability to sort of explain both sides. Now, we're hearing that this guy is really, really strong in the dark side and really, really evil. So, James, given the context of him possibly being a will, or let's just say some kind of a force god, what do you think his outcome is? What's his end game?
This is where the dilemma of everything about him being something this powerful hits, I find, is what would his end game be? Is it just taking over the galaxy? Because we saw that already. And then how do you overcome this threat if he's that powerful? Like, if you're going to make him... You know, I loved Wonder Woman, but at the end, you know, it was a fist fight. Is what's like that's not going to do it with Snoke. You know what I mean? Like it's just not. If he ends up being a fallen will, a fallen angel, the devil, whatever, like a fist fight, a lightsaber fight to end him, it almost seems like not enough.
Right.
There needs to be something more, and I don't have an answer to that because we've never seen something like that. And how do you destroy, like, just dark side matter? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, exactly. Like,
seems like impossible. But I think that builds it up to be, and you know, we keep hearing is Rian Johnson's putting this in a new direction. We're going to get a new direction on this. That sets up the ending to this whole thing to be something else. Like this potentially 9 could end. I don't think it will, but 9 could end dark. How would you feel if 8 ended happy? You're like, oh, everything's good. And because if you think about it, the First Order is basically the Rebel Alliance in The Force Awakens, and the New Republic, the Resistance, is kind of like the Empire at that point.
Right.
Like they've almost switched sides. So what if the movie switches sides, and the Rebel Alliance has this big win on Crate, and the First Order once again is like, ugh. You know, now it's Return of the Sith is the Revenge of the Sith is your next movie.
Right. I think that's interesting. I think it's sort of... I mean, I don't know exactly how I would feel about that. I do not... I think in some ways 8 will end on a high note for certain characters. I think there's going to be certain things going on that are good. But, like, it's Star Wars, right? So they can't beat the First Order in this movie. It's not going to be happy-go-lucky. And then, like, imagine if Episode 9 was like all of those last scenes in the third Lord of the Rings. Like, it just kept wrapping stuff up, and just you were like, oh my god, is this movie going to end? Like, you know what I mean? For like 2 hours. That'd be amazing. But in general, I don't think that's going to happen. I'm interested in the comments made by JJ where he said we want to bring all of the old movies together in 9, so it will unite the prequels, the original trilogy, and this new trilogy. And what I think is interesting about that is it sort of ties into this whole theory. Like, if Snoke is this ancient evil Force god being, I mean, is it possible that he manipulated the prophecy of the One? Is it possible that Anakin and his whole journey was completely misunderstood by the Jedi and Palpatine? I mean, there's so many cool ways that they can do that. You know what I mean? Was Palpatine manipulated? Did he sort of set the plate up? And now Snoke is sitting down and eating it. You know, it's sort of an interesting thing. My thing with Snoke, and I think Andy Serkis has said something to the effect of his goals are far more sinister. He's far darker than Palpatine. And I actually did a video on this recently where I was talking about how that makes sense. Because to me, what Snoke is trying to do is way bigger than some kind of battle for planets, for space, for power in that sense. I'm just continuously reminded of the thing from the trailer where he says, darkness rises and light to meet it. He's manipulating aspects of the Force. I think his end game is way bigger than winning a few battles or even a war. I think he's trying to do something to the Force itself. And so, I mean, that's kind of a crazy idea. What would be fun about that is that he's using war as the catalyst for that, right? Which sort of mirrors Palpatine. Palpatine created that war. He created that war to basically take more power himself. The war itself was a complete lie. People dying for not the reason they thought. And if you know anything about George, he has opinions about governments. He has opinions about propaganda. He has opinions about war. And so I think it would be interesting to sort of pay homage to some of those ideas that he has when it comes to Snoke's end goal. But what do you think about that? Do his goals lie in the Force itself?
I love that idea. That is something that we have not seen before. And what that is, I don't know. I don't understand why he would be afraid of. This makes sense why he would want Rey, but why would he be afraid of Luke Skywalker? Why a new Jedi rising? It's almost like he wants to try something with the dark side. But he also likes Kylo because of Kylo's attachment to the light and the dark, because he's being pulled from both sides, but he wants Kylo to go dark. It's a really intriguing thing that I haven't heard before, that he's trying to use the Force in a way that perhaps has never been used before. And using the war obviously makes a lot of sense, and we've seen that before, and that all works out in my mind. But what would he need the Force for? I'm so stumped right now.
Well, maybe the one thing I can think of, and by the way, I just want to address something in the chat real quick. Dakota Collins, you definitely know your stuff when it comes to Star Wars. You're hitting me with a lot of interesting questions, and you don't seem to be a fan of Disney. So I just wanted to shout you out. Thanks for watching, brother. I'll try to get to your questions at the end. But in general, what if it's something to do? And here's the problem. We as nerds, what we're going to do is sort of go down this trail, and then we're going to have to be like, okay, but how do you lens that for the casuals? How do you lens that for the casual fans? So, like, in my head, I'm like, oh, man, he wants to break down the barriers between the cosmic and the living force. He wants to exist as the cosmic force within the living force. But then you're like, I was thinking to myself, how am I going to explain that to my mom? You know what I mean? Like, she's not going to know what that is. So, I don't know. I almost feel like it needs to be a little simpler than that. But what if he's trying to... Because the thing with the Jedi is one of two things to me. It's either the Jedi were the things that originally beat him and imprisoned him, and so he fears that organization. Or he fears the new Jedi rising because it's putting stuff back out of balance. Right now, he's got his dark side dude. There's a light side girl. Luke is get off my lawn. So that's manageable, right? But as soon as you bring in a whole new order of Jedi, the scale sort of tips. So it could have something to do with that. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I can see that. But he doesn't know about Rey when he says a new Jedi will rise. You know?
Well, that depends, actually. Doesn't he say there's been an awakening right after that to Kylo?
Look, I'm not the one in the trivia contest, so I have no idea. Yeah. He might. So, okay, you might be right.
He might. We don't know for sure, but...
Well, there's been an awakening. So, I mean, scratch what I just said. There has been an awakening. So, obviously, he knows of something going on somewhere.
Right. That
is fine. And have you felt it? And he's tapping into that awakening for a reason. I really love that idea. And if he... Oh man, what if he's the one that wants to bring balance to the Force?
I know. Well, that's the thing, and we've sort of talked about this, where you were like, "What if Snoke and Luke discovered the same secret?" Do you want to go into that a little bit?
Yeah, why don't you take that one?
So this idea, what's interesting is with everything we've seen with Luke, he's sort of uncovering ancient secrets about the Force. He's got those old books. We think those are the Journal of the Wills. Do you hear this word "will" keep being used? Well, that's because it's on purpose. They've put it throughout the canon. They've done this on purpose. And so it's possible, and this is something that James and I have talked a lot about, that Luke and Snoke have stumbled upon the same secret of the Force. And they went two different ways with it. Luke went the way of like, I know nothing, I'm a failure, everything sucks, Jedi gotta go, get off my lawn. And Snoke was like, holy crap, I want the unified Force, I want unlimited power truly. So let's use the dark and the light. That's why if you watch the beginning intro video that I did from this, by the way, I spent a lot of time editing that. That's the audio from the audiobook of the Force Awakens novelization.
No way.
Yeah, and so
That's awesome.
Yeah, and so this is what Snoke said to Kylo about him being his best student yet, having the dark side and the light. And so Snoke has been obsessed with that idea. And we think that Luke is maybe onto a similar trail of thought. You know what I mean? Maybe has perhaps uncovered a similar thing. Now, before we get into the last part of this video, let's do another trivia question. Let's give some stuff away. All right, everybody.
Win me a pork.
All right, everybody. Get ready for this one, okay? Get ready for this one. The first person to answer this correctly in the comment section will win another little porg. And please send pictures of you when you get these porgs. When I ship this out to you, send pictures of you with your new, very comfy, awesome porg to James Razile. I'll show you all of his social media. So send him the pictures. That would be awesome. But anyways, here's the question. How many Star Wars films to date have been rated PG-13? Answer that question in the comment section below. And now we sort of get to go. Do 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 do. Porgs? That's incorrect, James Razile.
I tried.
Oh, Rob, that is not true. Melanie, that is not true either. Milo, that is incorrect. I don't know, guys. Rob McDonald getting that question incorrect kind of feels like I might beat him in this trivia. Oh, yeah. Scott O'Leary nails it. You guys forget Rogue One was also rated PG-13. That will bring the total to 3 films. Congratulations.
And Rogue One came out after Force Awakens.
Yes, it came out after Force Awakens. Rob, I don't know, man. I'm feeling good about this trivia, brother. I'm feeling real good about this. I have a premonition. Look, it's a shatter point, though. There could be some stuff about a date in November, maybe the 6th, that I don't know. Something's going on up here. I don't know what's going on. But in either case, we're going to wrap this up. We're going to do the last part of this video. And so let's talk about predictions for Snoke in Episode 8 and 9. We don't think he's going to be defeated, right?
No. I don't. No, I don't. But
do you think he's going to get defeated in 9, though?
I don't. There's a part of me that's like, they might just kill him off in 8. If he ends up being that fraud, they might just kill him off in 8. But I think then, like, who's your villain? And then you have to one movie to explain a whole new villain.
Right.
And then you kill him off in 9. If you don't kill him off, how is that satisfying to an audience? If 9 is your wrap-up of the Skywalker saga, how is that satisfying for an audience? If he does get killed off, and he is this big bad will thing, or fallen force, whatever, bigger than Palpatine, how is that satisfying for an audience? They're really in like a pickle on this whole thing right now. And it all really depends on the movie we're going to watch in a week, or some
Yeah.
of you on the 13th because you're lucky. But it all hinders on that, because if it comes out and he's like, this is an old man, kind of learned the Force on his own, then you're like, oh, okay, he could just be killed. That's fine.
Right.
But if he's like, look, I was watching down, and one day I fell from the sky and decided I wanted to take over everything. How do you beat that in a movie and a half?
Yeah.
How do you take that out? And that is when they hire the best writers in Hollywood, right? This is what they do. Chris Terry, Justice League. If you haven't seen it, go see it. It's the best movie
It's
ever
the
made
best
this
movie
year.
of the year.
It's probably in my top 1 of the year.
It's probably my top film for terrible movie that I actually enjoy, and I can't get past my fandom.
It was my favorite DC movie in November.
Yeah, definitely.
Hands down.
Definitely.
Hands down. But, like, they hire people to do this, and I don't, Kathleen Kennedy just fires people left and right. Like, they're not
Yep.
going to let this out of hand. And that's why I think, going way, way back, they have an end game for Snoke. I think they have an end game for everything that they're doing. Not everything, sorry. They have an end game for the saga. They don't have an end game maybe for Finn or for Poe. Definitely not Poe. But they have an end game. I'm going to say that. They have an end game for where Snoke and Luke are heading.
Yep. Yeah, I would say so. I guess the way I see it going down, just because, like, you can sort of read the tea leaves, they're going to probably do something crazy in 2. I think Snoke might lose some of his power, but I think that we're going to be really shocked at how much of a military might the First Order is and how strong Snoke is. Maybe not like in his ability to lightsaber fight, but in his ability to bring people to his cause. And so I think that what's going on here is you're going to see a very, very powerful First Order sort of come up against a resistance that is scrambling, maybe gets some kind of a moral victory. But in 9, you will essentially have an insurmountable threat, something that, like, how are they even going to get out of that? And I believe what will happen is something with the Force users, right? The 2 co-protagonists, Kylo Ren and Rey, and perhaps Luke Skywalker and perhaps our, the rest of the bunch are going to do something crazy to win the day. And what I think that will end up being is not killing Snoke, but perhaps trapping him again, perhaps destroying his body, putting him back out in the unknown region, something. My dream fanboy scenario here. Are you ready for this, James?
I think I know where you're going with it.
Thrawn comes back, and Thrawn, working with the Resistance, formulates a strategy, sort of sidetrack, because Thrawn's just so brilliant. So they figure out a way to sort of sidetrack and preoccupy the First Order. Then they get Snoke, take him out of there, trap him somehow back in the cosmic force, and then it's sort of like the spell is lifted and the First Order becomes less powerful, and they sort of beat it that way. So that's my fanboy hope.
I thought you were going to say Frozen and Carbonite.
Oh, that'd be pretty sick too, man. That'd be pretty sic.
Frozen and Carbonite, and it goes back to Jabba's palace.
Yeah, but you know what?
Boom.
I think it would be interesting if they sort of put him on ice. Like, the carbonite thing is interesting because either way, I think that's what they'll do. They'll sort of put him back on ice to maybe be used at a later time. Maybe, in 15 years when we get our new trilogy, the Skywalker continuation or something. Or, maybe they explore this guy Victor for Rian Johnson's new trilogy. So either way, and guys, if you have any last minute questions, please hit us up. We're going to be ending this stream in just a couple minutes here. Yeah, either way, man, do you think it's going to come down to Luke and Snoke?
Can I just mention a comment very quickly?
Yes.
Alberto right now, do you remember Mumra? Yes. That's who Snoke is. That would be awesome for all the He-Man or Thundercat fans.
Yeah, and honestly, there's something to that because there's that device. There's those rumors that he's a Force vampire of sorts.
Yeah, I never even thought of Mumra. Now I got to get my old Mumra action figures. I have both of them when he was like in the robes and then the big rah.
Yeah.
Oh man, that is awesome.
That's awesome.
Sorry, what was your question? So I got really excited about that.
Now I got excited. I'm checking out a little bit. But yeah, I guess. Do you think it's going to come down to Luke versus Snoke, or is it Rey versus Snoke? Who's gonna beat this guy?
Okay, so you want to ignite the green, right?
Oh, we gotta have Ignite the Green, baby.
I'm starting hashtag ignite the white.
Ooh, now does this have
So-
anything to do with recent comments made by Rian Johnson about a new hue of lightsaber being in The Last Jedi?
I have not heard of that, so no.
Okay, well that's a thing.
What the balls, man?
Yeah.
Okay, so I need to see. I'm off social media now, by the way, because I'm hearing there's so much stuff happening that I'm actually going dark a week earlier than I want. Forget it. I'm not even watching this.
Yep.
I'm not even on this show. No, this has to do with he has a red kyber around his neck. He has a necklace with a red kyber crystal. We've heard that for months and months and months, and it's like now it's on like I think the Funko Pop or something, so it's confirmed he has this. I think the green is more likely to happen unless he has another hue. Fine. But at the end of the movie, I came up with this thing yesterday in episode 71 with Brock, where what if all hell is broken loose and everyone's dead, or not to that extreme, but things are not looking well for everybody. And much like we all thought Luke was going to come to save the day on Starkiller Base, now all of a sudden it ends and Snoke's like, that.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden, all we see is this white blade come up. I don't know if it would end back to the Fangery, but so in 9, I could see that confrontation.
Yeah.
I think it would be really cool if one of the last shots of the movie is Luke's lightsaber igniting. And I say white because in the new canon, when the lightsaber is red, a Jedi can touch it, heal it, and then it goes white.
Yeah.
So
And then
I think it'd be neat if that was, like if he doesn't have his lightsaber anymore, that's an interesting ending for the movie that we've never seen. We've never seen a white lightsaber in the films.
Yep. Dakota Collins says, what if Snoke is the toxin thing from Rick and Morty? I'm actually not familiar with that. I haven't watched all of Rick and Morty, so I'm not sure. Do you know what he's talking about with that? Your mic's muted.
I have never seen Rick and Morty.
Oh, okay.
And I don't know how to use a mic either.
Yeah.
Rob told me about it, but he didn't mention that. I only watch Thundercats and He-Man. I don't know.
Well, yeah, you're fired. No, I'm not sure about that, Dakota. Scotty says he thinks the different hue will be the green. That's possible, unless I read it wrong, though, Scotty. He said something we haven't seen since the prequel era. And so that could be a number of different things. Could be purple, could be yellow, which you see with the temple guards. Could be a number of different things. I like the idea of it being green, but maybe hued towards white. You know what I mean? Maybe like a little bit more white of a green or something to that effect. I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure what to think about that. I mean, it'd be crazy if you had Mace Windu's lightsaber. That'd be nuts. But yeah, that's kind of that.
It was Mace Windu's burnt on Coruscant in the Darth Vader comic? Because they mentioned Yoda's. I can't remember if they mentioned Mace. No, Mace's went flying out the window.
Yeah, Mace's goes flying
so
out.
Maz
the window.
has it.
Right. It's
Maz
very
has
possible. Hey, look, you never know where all these lightsabers show up. And the Kyber plays such an important role now, so you never know, man. It is an interesting time. I'm super excited. Last thing I want to mention is Melanie says you think it'll be all three versus Snoke, Luke, Kylo, and Rey. That's a dream scenario for me. That's a dream scenario. Luke there. This is my new student who I didn't even want to train. This is who I thought was the chosen one. I don't even want to look at this guy. But we have to fight to beat this Snoke thing. That would be awesome. I would love that. So, Melanie, shout out to you. I hope that's the case. Let me see here. About Luke using the green saber. Very cool. But it would be awesome to see him revealing so powerful the Force he doesn't need lightsabers. It's interesting. Alberto, I've thought a lot about that. Does Luke even need a lightsaber? And, look, there's a lot. If you look at, like, Star Wars, if you watch, like, the Clone Wars and stuff, like, Obi-Wan has this line where he's talking about how it's really difficult to use the Force correctly when you're in a lightsaber fight. And he mentions, like, this is something he needs to work on. And so I think, like, essentially, like, imagine it like this. You know how Yoda, like, gets all meditative when he lifts stuff up? Well, if you're doing something like that, and someone just slices you in half, you're done. So I think that you do need a lightsaber. I think that Luke would need a lightsaber, but it will be very interesting to see how strong he will be in The Last Jedi. I'm hoping for some real power. Although we haven't even seen any shots of him off Ahch-To.
Yeah.
What if he doesn't leave Ahch-To? Last question, James. Are you going to be pissed if Luke doesn't leave Ahch-To?
This was actually one of our Never Tell Me the Odds yesterday. I will not be pissed. Is that weird to say?
Oh, my God.
I won't be. Because here's why.
But sorry, go on.
But let me tell you why, though.
Yep.
because I think it'll work for the story. I don't want him just to leave the island because we all want him to leave the island. I want him to leave the island because we need him to leave. Like, there's a purpose for him to leave the island. If his purpose is fulfilled on the island with Rey, with the Knights of Ren, whatever happens there, I'll be okay if he stays on the island. Why not? I mean, if you're just going to take him off the island for the sake of taking him off the island, I'm not too on board with that.
Yeah. I don't know. I think it would be interesting if he said... I think the way they'll play it is that he will say he's not leaving the island, but I do think it would be dope if he actually does. Like, if we see him on Crate...
Oh, yeah.
Or something like that. And there were some rumors that we're getting that Leia scene with him. So I think he'll be the reluctant hero, like the super reluctant hero, but he will come back. And I'm hoping that, because of some things that happen behind the scenes, that Luke actually plays a major role in Episode 9 as well. I don't want to see him die in this film. So that's kind of where my thoughts are.
Yeah, I think he will leave, but I'm okay if he doesn't. Can I just bring up one thing that has nothing to do with Snoke quickly? This is kind of like the different hue of lightsaber, I think. 'Cause, did you hear Ryan Johnson say that, or did you read that quote?
I read that quote. Okay.
So he also was asked about his new trilogy, and he said, maybe we'll bring old Jar Jar will be in it, and and he goes, he'll be shot in black and white, blah blah blah. I want to know what his tone was in saying this new hue. Like, was it like, maybe we'll get a new hue, or maybe was it just like trying to, like, that's what, because the Jar Jar thing, I absolutely love it, because he acknowledges, first of all, that Jar Jar's a thing and he'd be old, and he's not just saying, I hate Jar Jar, which I like, even though he could possibly hate Jar Jar, but he's not saying that.
Right.
I love it. But he's also making a joke about it, because then he goes on to say how it'd be shot in black and white, and it'll be like The Wrestler and blah, 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 which I would watch that movie.
Right,
so the hue, the lightsaber hue, what was his tone?
Yeah, we don't really necessarily know. Look, there's so much that we don't know about. I mean, we're a week away from this movie. I'm so excited. By the way, guys, we are doing the Last Jedi Livestream on Thursday, the day before the movie comes out. We're both seeing it that night, though, right?
Yeah, I'm seeing it at 6 p.m. Eastern.
Yeah, me too. You're doing the fan event thing?
A fan event. Got my free popcorn, my free trading cards. And I'm in one of the theaters where they serve alcohol, so I'm gonna have a beer.
The Last Jedi. That's what's on my shirt, ladies and gentlemen. And wow, I'm excited. But guess what? All of you Star Wars fans, I don't want to upset you, but the last episode is going to circle around Reylo. That's right, Reylo. Kylo Ren and Rey are going to be lovers by the end of The Last Jedi. We're going to break down all the evidence, explain why it makes perfect sense, and why this is the direction that the trilogy will take. Whether you hate it or whether you love it, come back next week. Have fun with us on the Last Jedi live stream. Get excited. Go see the movie. Both James and myself are going to be doing a ton of content after The Last Jedi comes out. Holy crap, I can't wait. I know you can't wait, James.
Yeah.
Before we get out of here...
we're gonna do a ranking Star Wars on our channel for New Year's Day. We're gonna have that up New Year's Day. You're a part of that, by the way.
Yeah, I know, and I can't wait to tell all of them that they're wrong, guys. I don't want to be nationalist over here, but something about that Canadian water, they're crazy up there. They don't know things about movies.
Phantom Menace.
Oh God.
Phantom Menace.
Oh God, no. This is why he's not getting a pork. This is why no pork for you. But anyways, James, before we get out of here, tell everyone where they can find you online.
You can find me Twitter, Instagram, and all that stuff at Petzafina, Pezzafina. And that's where I hang out and do all my... I won't be there for a week, so if you go on there, you can follow me, and I promise to follow you at 9 or 10 p.m. Thursday night, next Thursday.
Nice. Yes, and go check out Rebel Scum Podcast. They do great stuff over there, tons of cool content. I interact with them a lot. Looking forward to the Duel of the Fates with Rob.
Yeah.
Guys, that trivia contest is going to be sick. It's going to be awesome. So check that out. I'm, of course, Josh from the Den of Nerds. Go to thedenofnerds.com. Go to the Den of Nerds YouTube. Go to the Den of Nerds Deli. Go to the Den of Nerds Supermarket. The Den of Nerds everything. We do a lot of stuff. It's very cool, nerdy stuff.
I'm going to the deli.
Yeah, go to the deli. Get yourself a sandwich. It's all good. Guys, thank you so much. This has been so fun for us. I know I've really loved doing this. I know James has loved doing this. It's so fun just to hang out with you guys, talk Star Wars, break down some stuff as pundits in this crazy fandom world. We'll see you guys next week. And as always, may the Force be with you guys. always.